today we will be talking about AWS organizations and governance, and we'll see why that matters just in some slide after this one. Okay. So what we'll learn multi-account strategies and benefits. We'll look at AWS organization. We'll look at service control policies, consolidated billing, and we will talk about control tower. We'll talk about RAM, resource for resource sharing. We'll also talk about self-service with AWS Service Catalog, and then we'll talk about best practice, basically, right? Where you talk about multi-account. So if you think about it, all this while, we've had our own account. So everyone has AWS account, especially the people who have followed me from the beginning, right? So that you have like one account that you've been using. It's like free tier account and all that. So if you think about it, most people go into the cloud, for example, myself or a lot of people out there, they usually start with an account, right? Maybe just have one account, they launch their stuff. But maybe at that point they're just innovating, they're trying stuff out. But at some point, you will now realize that maybe one account is not enough, right? Maybe you now have like second account, you have like the third account, fourth account, but the problem is that when you start having those accounts in isolation, like managing them separately, it becomes complex as time goes on, right? And that's why, first of all, multi-account is good because the reason is that there are many reasons you want to have separate accounts, right? Sometimes it could be business reasons, and sometimes it could also be for technical reasons. So if you look at the business on the business side, you would want to more or less like say, okay, I want this account to be used by a specific department or a cost center. You could also say, I want production to have its own account. I want dev and testing to have its own account. You could also say you want to create resource boundary, more or less like isolate resources, right? So you don't want something, if something happens to this account, you don't want it to affect the other account, right? You could also say you want to do independent service limits per account. And the reason is because many of the things you do inside AWS, a lot of them are controlled by quotas, right? And you don't want quota affecting your entire system. Maybe you want a situation whereby some system can request more quota, and so in some systems, maybe you don't, in some accounts, you don't really care that much, right? So if you think about it on the business side, there are so many reasons why you should have multiple accounts. What about on the technical side? Technical in the sense that you're also trying to reduce the blast radius, right? Blast radius is something you should pay attention to because if you have one account and somebody gets in or something happens to that one account, if that's where everything you have is deployed, it means that there's a probability that your blast radius will be very, very high. Like it will be wide. So what it means is that you're trying to reduce that blast radius. So if something happens and it happens in dev, you know that prod is protected, right? But again, it also helps you with compliance, regulatory needs, and then you can also have different security requirements, right, per workload. And the reason is that sometimes dev environment, sandbox environment, the security is relaxed. But when you go to prod, usually you want to put all your best security in there because you know that's production. You don't want things to go wrong, right? And then you see how also simplified billing is something you gain when you have multiple accounts, right? You can actually do like a simplified billing where billing goes to one place instead of handling it one after the other, right? Right now, as a single account, if you have a single account, you get the bill, but you could have multiple accounts and still have the bill all in one place, and we'll see what that looks like. Okay. So if you think about it, there are many strategies, honestly, and I think I've shared this severally on this calls that AWS, there's so many options, so many ways to do things, right? Whatever works for you is what you should go with, right? So there is so many organizational patterns that you see when you're trying to organize, right? Think about it. You have different workloads here and there. You could decide how you want to break them. Maybe you want to break them by environment. Say dev, test, staging, production. Dev is like where your developers are building stuff. Testing is maybe like a place you're testing. Staging is like just before production. You stage it somewhere, people can test and make sure that it's good. And then after that, you roll it out to production, right? You can also do by department. You can say finance, for example, should have their own organization. Engineering should have their own. Marketing should have. It just depends on how big your organization is, right? You can also do by project. So you can say project A, have a different account or organization. You can also do project B. You can break it by project. And then you can do by lifecycle. You can say when you spin up a new account, it's a sandbox. At some point, you move it to a workload. And maybe at some point, you archive it, right? So there are many options. There's some best practices there, more or less like you have to use like consistent tagging standards. What it means is that we've seen how we use tags, right? But it becomes more important when you start dealing with multi-account, multi-department or multi-environment. Tags become very, very essential. Okay, centralized login to dedicated account. The point is that all these your accounts to be doing stuff is good. You move the logs to one place, maybe a different account where it's in one place. You can see all the things that are happening across your account, right? And then you can also have like a separate security audit account just to make sure that account is really where you want to see your security stance when you look at the entire account, right? We've seen a couple of those, but now we're seeing it at an organizational level. And then you can also add automated account provisioning as a best practice, right? Cool. So that brings us to AWS organization. Like we've talked about the need for you to have multiple accounts, reducing the blast radius, breaking it down by department, breaking it down by you use, by department, by unit, or by project. But how do you do that in AWS? And that's where AWS organization comes in. It's a global service. That's just one thing you need to know, and it's for basically managing multiple AWS accounts, right? And it does it well. The beauty of it is that you can have hierarchy. You can say one unit, you can have like a department, and then beneath that you can have other departments, right? So just like how you can have like parents department, and then you can have like a parent unit, and then you can have like a child unit, right? So you see how you can keep a hierarchy with AWS organization. Also, you can. It's basically the whole idea is for you to do centralized management. So management in one place, right? Instead of you managing those accounts in isolation, you can basically do it from one place, right? It's a free service, so it's free, no additional charge. You only pay for the resources that are going to probably that's in the resources that are like in your account specifically, maybe like your workload account, right? So when you think about some of the major benefits of organizations that you need to know, and it's something that you need to keep at the back of your mind throughout your journey in AWS, is that consolidated billing. Meaning, if you have an AWS organization, all the accounts under it, you can set up consolidated billing in such a way that all the billing goes to one account, right? So you don't have to pay your individual bills separately. So if you have 10 accounts, all the 10 accounts, the billing will be rolled up to one place, and then you can pay it in just one place. You can also do volume discount. You know how in AWS, a lot of the things you use, sometimes it's based on how much you use, right? So the point is that when you have many accounts, what it means is that you can get volume discount from those accounts, right? So instead of where one account is counting towards the volume, you can have multiple accounts count towards that volume, right? And you see how that works at some point. And then you can obviously do centralized policy management, which is one of the key things. Because when you don't have so many accounts, it's hard for you to track what is compliant, which role is where, and all that. But with like a centralized management, you can pretty much manage that, better. And then you can do automatic account creation. Right now, if you want to create an account, if you don't have like an AWS organization, you have to go create a new account. You have to fill in that process again. But if you have like an AWS organization, creating an account is very easy because it's just like you're creating a new account in an organization. Okay. So let's talk about organizational structure. There's usually when you create your first organization, it's like an organization, right? So that's like the first organization. But at that point, you get a management account, and the management account is really so the root itself is the top of the organizational hierarchy, and we're going to see that just in a while. We're going to see that. But the point is that when you create an organization, you get like the root organization, right? Which means like your entire organization is known by something. Like there's an ID that says this is your organization, right? And then as part of that, you get a management account. And a management account is simply where you manage all the other accounts. So it's like, the main account that does like the master and everything that has to do with managing the other accounts, right? And then within there, one of the key things you don't need to know is that like there are organizational units. Just see it as groupings. So it's just a unit for you to group accounts. So you can say this account, this account, this account, they're all production accounts. This account, they're all dev accounts, and they belong to the dev unit. And these other accounts, they belong to the prod unit, right? So, and then member accounts are just basically accounts. So whatever account you have right now, you're just using a single account that does not belong to an organization. But I can actually have an organization and bring your account over. And for that reason, I can manage your account from even a higher level, right? And we'll see all that. And obviously, I just did put some example. You have a root, you have a production OU, you have like an app account, multiple accounts. And that's exactly what you have in the diagram. In this case, I did put just one member account, but you can have an organizational root, an OU, and then within that OU, you can have multiple accounts, right? It just depends on your structure. So just know that these things are there, but it always depends on how you're using it, what's your organization like, and all that, right? But there is room for you to create this. So organizational unit, I'm not going to spend much time, but it's just a container. It's a container for your accounts. It can be nested up to 5 level deeps. You can basically 5 levels deep, right? So it means you can nest it. Like you can have nested OUs, right? That are up to 5 level deeps, right? You can have prod, under prod, you can have HR, you can break it down basically. And then you can obviously apply policies at OU level. So you can actually have a policy that applies at an OU level, meaning every account that is inside of that OU is going to be affected by that policy. And we're going to see what that looks like. And then flexible organizational design. So nobody's boxing you in, nobody's putting you in a box. Basically work with what you have, like what works for your organization. It depends on how you're structured, that's exactly how you need to go creating your organization, right? So common OU patterns by business units, it could be by environment. So some people do OUs based on a business unit. They can say finance, they can say HR and engineering. The reason is because the need for finance will be different from engineering. Engineering is the tech unit, right? So it means there might be more things happening there compared to when you have like an organization unit that is finance or HR, right? So some people can break based on that, but some people can also break based on environment, say dev, test and prop. You can have OUs, and then some people can break by project. You can also break by life cycle. You can even come up with your own pattern if you want. Honestly, it's just based on your use case. But the good thing is that AWS organization supports all these use cases that you can have. So maybe I'm just going to talk about everything related to, yes, I'm just going to talk about everything related to AWS organizations before we go to the UI, the console, so that I don't come back there, okay? So the next thing that is critical, I think I've mentioned it in previous slide, but this is like a good place to show an example of how it works, right? So a key thing that is known with AWS organization is service control policies. And the point is that it's just the policies. It's like the IAM policy that you know. It's just that this one is really used at an organizational level. What it means is that we've seen our OU, and OU can be nested, that's one, and it can have multiple accounts underneath. The point is that at an OU level, you can apply a policy and it's going to apply to every entity that is within that OU, right? So all the OUs and all the accounts within the OU is going to be impacted by that policy, okay? So JSON policy that sets permission guardrails. Permissions, you've seen it, that permissions are things that can allow you or can deny you to do something, right? And it obviously defines the maximum permission for accounts. And you see how powerful it is, because even if you're an admin within an account, if there's an SCP that says you can't do something, you can't do it, right? It's very, very powerful. So it applies to root, OU, or even the account itself. So it means that it can apply to an OU, it can also apply to an account. And then it's actually inherited down, right? You've seen, I think I did mention that there's when you deal with AWS organization, there's like an hierarchy that you're keeping. So it means that you can inherit those SCPs as you go down, right? It does not apply to the management account. We had a management account when you're creating an organization. That SCP does not apply to it, but it applies to all users and roles, including root users, right? So no matter how powerful your user is in an account, an SCP can apply to you, right? They don't affect service linked roles. We've seen how services move, like one service, if you're the roles are used from inter-service communication in AWS, SCPs don't affect them. Must have explicit allow. That's just the thing, right? Because it denies by default. The way SCP works, it denies by default. It means you have to have like an explicit allow for it to do what it has to do, right? It can whitelist, it can blacklist, right? The point is that just the way IAM policies are, that you have as allow, you can also have deny. That's just the way you have your SCPs also, right? Here I'm just going to, I have this in the slide just for you to more or less like be curious in terms of the patterns you see, but there's so many strategies. You could say you can start with a blacklist, more or less like you can do like a blacklist strategy. So what means is that start with the full access policy, which is like where everything is going to start from. So when you create like an AWS organization, there is room for you to have like a full AWS access policy added to it. But again, from there you can now begin to add explicit deny, right? For restricted services, meaning you allow everything and then you specifically deny the things you don't want. You can also say whitelist, right? Start with no access at all and then begin to explicitly approve the services that you want. It's also a way you can go. It's always based on your use case. So, and you think about it, there are many reasons. When you belong to an organization where there's so many accounts, you now begin to see why these things matter. Because sometimes in an account, you don't do anything AI ML related. Sometimes you don't want sub-child accounts to go and be deploying EC2 machines that have so many GPUs or something, right? You don't have any business with ML. So it's maybe you can use an SCP to control and restrict the kind of machines you can deploy, the kind of services you can use. If you don't deal with Redshift, maybe you can say in this organization you cannot use Redshift at all. So there are so many things you can do. So for example, prevent use of expensive services, enforce regional restrictions, more or less like you can't do things outside these regions, for example. You can also restrict deletion of critical resources. If you have resources that are very critical, you can restrict them at an organizational level so that you will not be able to do anything with it. Okay. These are just examples, right? Deny people from leaving the organization, require specific regions for you to do stuff in the specific regions, restrict instance type. Maybe you just want to allow a specific instance type, right? These are all just examples that you can have. But remember, they're just policies that you can apply. And you see an example. Okay. So that's a good segue for us to go to AWS organization. Usually, so this account, this is the account I'll be working from. It's like a new account. I don't think I've used this account since I started this call, but I want to use it for this class. So obviously I have a lot of accounts, but this one is what I'll be using for the class. And then I think a lot of you have seen this account, this particular one that is here. Most people would have seen this one. So this is what I'll be doing. So here, both of them, if you see this AWS organization, there's really nothing. So it's plain. So if I go to AWS organization, there's really nothing here. If I go to invitation, it's basically plain, right? Here it's similar, right? The point is that organization, you have to start from one account. So one account has to start that organization, which is exactly what we're going to do. So in this case, I'm going to use this account to start the organization and then bring in other accounts. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm logged in as the root, but I mean, I can log in as somebody who has the right access to do whatever I need to do now. So I'm going to create an organization, right? Consideration for account management is just saying some things, but I'm just going to create an organization, right? And automatically, when I created the organization, I hope you can see my screen clearly, but the point is that it has created an organization, right? And you can see that the root, there is really an ID here that says it's the root, and underneath there's just one account. You can see this is the name of the account. This is my, what do you call it? This is the ID of the account, and you can see this is my email, right? Of the account. So right now we just have a plain organization and an account that is under. We've not done any of the things we've been talking about in the slide, right? So the first thing I want to do is, I mean, organization would not make much sense unless there are like two accounts at least. That's when you get the benefit of an organization. But already, because I created the organization from here, automatically this account already becomes the management account. And I think I've said it that the management account is for management. It's very powerful, you know. So that's really where all the administrative stuff are going to be happening. But we already have a management account at this point. So the next thing we want to do is we want to bring other accounts, right? Because at the end of the day, you want more accounts that you want to manage in your organization. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create an invitation. So I'm going to invite an AWS account. Remember, it has to be an account that you own, right? So here, I'm just going to go to the other side. I'm just going to copy this ID. I own both accounts. I'm going to go here and I'll say, this is saying create an AWS account, because that's one of the benefits you get from using AWS organization. You can easily provision an account, unlike the way it is now, where if you want to create an account, you go and register. But once you have an organization, you can actually mint. It's like you're minting accounts, which is really nice. But in this case, I'm going to be inviting an existing account. So I'll go here, I'll just paste my account, the other one that is there. I'll say add account. No, I'm really not adding a new one. I'm just using that one. I'll say, I would love you to join my organization. I mean, honestly, both accounts are mine. I don't need this message because I know what I'm doing. I know I'm the one asking myself to join the organization. So I'm just going to send the invitation, right? So the invitation has been sent. Remember that, yeah, the point is that you can't just add someone to your organization. You have to basically issue an invitation. So if I refresh here, obviously they will send me an email. You can also go through the email, but you can see there is an invitation on the other account saying you've been invited by this person to join the account, right? Do you want to proceed? You can see the organization ID. In this case, I'm bringing in an account. There's nothing OU related yet. So I'm going to accept the invitation. So now I've joined that organization. That's just the point. And if I go here and I refresh, you see I now have multiple accounts. You see that I now have multiple accounts. So I have this account, right, which is the management account that invited the other account. But now I also have this account, which is now like a new account, right? So we now have two accounts, but we don't have any OU, right? So the point is that's when we now need to start creating OUs. Maybe this new account that I brought, maybe it's actually my dev account. So I'll go here. I would say I want a new, I'm going to create, you can see organizational unit. So I'm going to create a new unit. I will say dev, right? I'll just call it dev. I'll say create organizational unit. Maybe inside dev, maybe there's a specific product called, maybe let's say there is a specific product called social, for example. Maybe it's a social product under dev. I mean, it depends on how big your organization is. Trust me, sometimes the way you're using AWS account, maybe you're just using one account, but in the real world, there's so many accounts you're dealing with, and these things are grouped, they are arranged based on organization. But you can already see we have a root. In that root, there's dev. Inside dev, there's like a social. You can see there is nothing. There is no resource in that social. But I can actually move this account that I did create. I can actually take this account and then move it to what do you call it? I can move it to an OU, right? So here, maybe I'm not moving it to dev. Maybe I'm not moving it. Maybe I'm moving it to social. So I'm moving it under an OU that is under dev, right? So I'm going to do it. I'm going to move. So the point is, I've now moved that account. So this account that I created on this other side, I've moved it to the organizational, the OU called social, right? But the good thing about it is that you can see the hierarchy. You can see there's the root covers everybody's dev, social. You can break it down. It's by your requirements, right? Yeah. Is by requirement. The good thing about it is that there's now so many things you can do inside of the AWS organization. This is just one of it, right? Creating the OUs, bringing those accounts, organizing them. This is just like organizational. So, but there's many more things you can do. The one that I really want to also talk about is you can see many things that you can enable. For example, security hub. These are like policies that you can set, but there are even services that you can now benefit from that you can use at an organizational level. So, for example, you can have Amazon Detective at an organization level, Inspector, Guard Duty, Macy, Amazon Q, all these services. Many of them we've talked about them before, but you were looking at them from an account perspective. But now you can actually look at them. You can use them from an organizational perspective, right? So all these services can be then enabled, at an organizational perspective, such that in one place you can basically see, your detective for your security, or for example, you can in your management account or like your security account see your security posture throughout your entire organization, which is why organizations are very powerful. Okay, so these are many services that you can focus. There's so many things here, so I'm not going to go into them. The thing I'm really going to talk about is policies, right? So there are many policies that you're going to see here, right? So there is resource control policy. The one we are really interested in is SCPs, right? The one we talked about, which is service control policy. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go there and I'll enable it, right? So I'll enable it. I didn't really show you the OU before enabling this policy. But one thing you notice is that there is now full AWS access, right? Because this is where it creates. This is the fourth policy it gives you. The whole idea is that allow everybody to do everything, right? You don't want to restrict everybody. So if I go back to the organization that we've created, this is an invitation. If I go back to the organization, right? One thing you notice, if I now click down to social, for example, let's use social because that's where something is. It has this child. But if I look at the policy, you can see it now has the policy that we just enabled. This is one feature of AWS organization that we just enabled. So we've enabled service control policies. And for that reason, we have full access, full access, full access. And if you see, this one is attached to the root, this is attached to dev, this is attached directly, right? The point is that many of these policies, they cascade down, right? They cascade down because it's up there, but it can cascade down. So what we can do is that we can create our own policy, for example. So if we go to service control policy that we just created, and we try to create a policy, we can create our own. So in this case, I'm just going to call it deny. I'm just going to show you how powerful it is. So I can say deny EC2, for example, just deny EC2, and I'm saying deny EC2 everywhere. Maybe you don't use EC2 wherever you are. Maybe it's possible, but I'm just going to do EC2 as a service, for example, and then I'm just going to search for an action that says, if effect is deny, and then the action is EC2, and then what I would just do is search for all actions basically. So what I'm saying is deny EC2 star on everything. So I'm just going to put a star here, right? So I think this should be familiar with you should be familiar with this, right? So I'm just saying this is an SCP that I'm saying deny EC2 everywhere, and I'm saying that deny EC2 action on everything, and then I'm going to create the policy, right? So I've created the policy, deny EC2. It doesn't mean that the policy is applied yet. I just created it. So what I'm going to do is now go to a particular OU, for example, and apply that policy, right? So what we can do is that I will just go to the one that I created before. So here, I'm going to go here. I'll go to policies under that OU, right? And then you see, these are the policies it has. I can attach a new one. I can attach this one that I just created, and I'll say attach policy. Now, what it means is that if I go back to that organization and I check the social, if I click on that OU, if I see the policies, you see that it has deny EC2, right? And it also has all the full access that it had from the one. But now I have a new one. So what do you think is going to happen? If I go to the other account, I should be able to test this out. Here, I'm an admin. Brainyl here, I've always used this account to do a lot of stuff on this call. And Brainyl on this other account is an admin. But let me now see if I can actually do EC2, like go into EC2 and try to do something. So if I go to EC2, for example, let me try and launch an EC2 instance. We've done this severally, right? And nothing stops us from doing this. We've always launched EC2 instance as part of this class. So I'll just call it my web server. We always do this most times, right? So I'm saying my web server, and then I'm just going to do Amazon Linux. In this case, T3 Micro is fine. It's free tier eligible. Let me see. It's saying which AMI doesn't exist. Let me just try and see if it's going to. You're not authorized to perform this app operation. Yeah, you can see it's actually failing. The reason is because I won't even be able to launch EC2 because now everything is. You see this EC2 describe key pairs, but I'm saying proceed, right? I'll just say proceed. But one thing you notice is that ideally it's supposed to be able to describe the key pairs within the account. But you can see it doesn't have permission, right? It's been restricted. What do you think is going to happen if I try to launch this EC2 instance? Um, let's see, what does it say? Yeah, it's not even going to allow me. So here, for example, I'm trying to list VPC. It's not going to, because all those things are actions that are inside of EC2, right? So that's the point. Although Brainyl in this account is an admin, I'm the admin in this account, but the thing is that I'm subject to the rules in the organization, right? So the organization can lock me down. So it means that an organization can give you an account, but they still can decide what you can do with that account. And that's what makes, AWS very powerful and flexible, because it's not about if you can get into an account, but it's about what you can do, right? So, and we've just shown that. Right now, I won't be able to do anything. But if I go to any other place, for example, other services, SNS, for example, it's just going to work. I won't have any restriction, because there's also a policy that allows everything, but there's now an explicit deny for EC2, right? I can see all the topics that I've created before. I can pretty much delete a topic. So all other actions are still working for me, okay? It's just that the one for creating EC2 is not working. Cool. So honestly, organization is really, there is no big organization in AWS that will not use AWS organization. It's like a must, because that's really where you begin to see the power of the cloud, right? Managing multi accounts. And I think I've said it several on this call, that now you're dealing with a single account, but that's not how it's going to be. You will find yourself working with multiple accounts. So I think this is fine. Honestly, I don't need to go further. There are many more advanced things inside of an AWS organization, but I'm not going to go that far. Okay. So what we can now do is that we can basically now just remove our organization, right? So what we can basically do is that we can just go to settings, for example, and we'll just say delete organization, right? Because I don't need it again. I've showed you what I wanted to show you, how you can create one and how you can create like an SCP that controls stuff. But I can actually go and delete the organization. Let me see what it's going to say. You must first remove all member accounts. So it looks like I have a lot of one account that I did bring that I need to remove. Remember, we brought an account. So I'll go to that account. The account is on the other side. I'm going to go to action, and I'm going to say remove from organization. Just the way we brought it in, we can also take the user out. So I'm going to say remove. I've now been removed. If I go to this side and I go to AWS organization, you will notice that I no longer belong to any organization, because the organization that invited me before has booted me out. So there's no longer organization here. It's back to plain. And then here, what I can now do is I can delete the organization so that everything goes back to how it was before. Okay. So I'm just going to copy this and then delete. Okay. Good. So we're back to square one. Okay. So, but there are many things inside of AWS organization. Like I mentioned, if you start doing a lot with AWS, you notice that there are so many accounts that you have to manage. And the only way to make that easy is using an AWS organization. Okay. So let's see. I thought my slide was on. What happened to my slide? Let's see. I thought I was sharing the slide just now. Okay, let me see. Something closed the slide. I'm not sure what that is, but let's continue. So where were we? We've talked about the SCP. Let's just talk briefly about consolidated billing. So I'm just going to slideshow. I'm going to talk about consolidated billing. So just the way I showed the organization just now, you can have multiple units, you can have multiple accounts inside that organization. The point is that all the bills from the accounts, you can have a consolidated billing in such a way that all the accounts, single payment method. So you pay all your bills in one place. That's really what consolidation billing is. And it's a benefit of AWS organization. Okay. You can also do combined view. It means in one place, you can see all the costs throughout your organization. You can see which account is costing you the most, which service they are using in that account, and all that. So it's like you can, in one place, have a great lens of, usage across your organization, right? So the management account will pay, as you saw when we created an organization, the account that created it became the management account. So all the payments will happen from there. And then AWS organization, all these things, consolidated billing is free. You don't need to pay for this consolidated billing feature, right? But one of the key benefits you see is that, you can do combined usage. The point is that if there are any benefits within your accounts, right, that can be shared, if you're using AWS organization, that benefit can be shared. And one of it is basically volume discounts. So for example, if AWS is saying if you're using 1 terabyte, you get a lot of benefit. But maybe one account is not using up to 1 terabyte. If you now have multiple accounts that can get that 1 terabyte, then you also get that same volume discount. Okay. You can do reserved instance sharing. So for example, I think we've discussed it in one of the calls, what reserved instance is, but the point is that you can buy it in one account, but you can also share it with other accounts, right? Savings plans sharing is same. It can also apply. And then single bill. Right now, if you have multiple accounts that I have currently, I usually get billed separately for those accounts. But if you have AWS organization, the bill will be one bill, okay, for the entire organization. Cool. That brings us to Control Tower. That brings us to Control Tower. There's no way you talk about AWS organization and not talk about Control Tower. And you wonder what is the difference. The difference is basically people have used organizations severally, and they continue to do a set of things, right? Usually, when you create an organization, you start doing SCP, you start doing guardrails, you start creating more or less like security account, you start creating an account to keep logs, you start creating like so many accounts, and just for managing. Some will manage your security, some will manage your logs, So all that those things are practices that became things people were doing from using AWS organization, right? And then that was what gave birth to Control Tower. The point is that it's actually an automated multi-account setup service. The whole idea is that it can do a multi-account setup for you following best practice, right? So the things usually AWS organization, if you know what you're doing, you don't. I mean, it's good for you to use Control Tower, but for those who knows exactly what they want, you can create an AWS organization and begin to create your different groupings. You can say, I'm creating a special account for a different OU that is a security OU, a security account, and I'm going to delegate all my security tasks to it. I'm creating a log account, a log archive account to keep all my logs. You can do all that. You can do all the breaking and all the segregation yourself. But you can also depend on Control Tower to make that easy. So it's like following best practice. So built on top of AWS organization. So it means that the same things you were seeing, Control Tower is going to give you, but again, it's going to implement AWS best practice automatically. So just with a click of a button and some configuration, you already have like a landing zone that that has all the AWS best practice that you can use for your AWS organization, right? So provide landing zone for new accounts. And what are the key features? Set up environment in few clicks. You will see that you can just basically set up a whole organization just in few clicks. Automatic policy management with guardrails. We didn't really go into details in all those things, but what I'm saying is that you could manage them in AWS organization yourself. It's just that over time it becomes maybe it becomes a lot, and Control Tower can just simplify that for you. And then you can detect, remediate policy violations. Interactive compliance dashboard, account factory for provisioning, right? Which is one of the benefits you see. Like I said, when I was talking about inviting an account the other time, you saw that inviting an account was one, but you could also use the AWS organization to more or less like vend a new account, right? And that's also one of the benefits you could get with Control Tower. Okay. So when you look at the components in Control Tower, there is like a landing zone, which is like a well-architected multi-account environment. The point is that people have used AWS organization severally, and that obviously give birth to a pattern where people can now rely on a landing zone to get like the best practice inside of AWS. Baseline configuration following those best practices that I talked about, pre-configured organizational structure, right? So it means instead of you using the AWS organization to set them one after the other, you can actually use landing zone to just provision something that follows best practice and that can get you started. Okay. And then you can have security login account. Security account will take care of all the login all the security that we've seen, Macy, Security Hub, Guard Duty. We've talked about all that, right? So you can have an account specifically for that. You can also have like an account that does all your login, right? All your CloudTrail logs, all your important logs, you can move them there, right? And there are some things you see about guardrails. Guardrails are broken down into like you can see like the enforcement type, and you can also see the enforcement level. For the enforcement type, some are preventive, right? Preventive is just SCPs that we saw just now. You notice that once the SCP was in place, I couldn't do anything in the other account, right? So that's like preventive. But you can also do detective, and we've seen config on one of our calls. But what it means is that you can actually create a detective, have like a guardrail that's like a detective that tells you when something is not conforming, right? But SCP can actually prevent the thing from happening, while detective can help in a detective mode. You can actually see that these things are not behaving exactly how you want them, right? But you can also have enforcement level, which can be in the form of mandatory. Some things will just always enforced by the Control Tower. Some are strongly recommended, meaning it's enabled by default based on best practice, but you can choose not to enable them. And then optional is obviously, it's optional as mentioned, right? Applied based on the organizational needs if you want, okay? So let's go to see what control. So again, just a caveat before I go into this. If you don't want to, right? Because Control Tower creates a lot of things. In AWS organization, we created the organization. We had the control to create the units, bring in accounts, set up everything ourselves. But Control Tower is going to assume that, oh, you're interested in setting up a landing zone that gives you best practice of bringing up an AWS organization. You see it. So the point is that if you maybe for your learning, it may come with some cost because it's going to create some account, set up so many things. So you need to be sure what you are doing because you need to be able to set it up. You need to be able to clean it, also tear it down. Tearing down is not very easy, okay? But I'm just going to show you what it looks like so that you know that it's a thing. But again, you appreciate it if you have an idea of organization, which is why we started by showing you what an organization is, how you can create OUs, bring in accounts, push them under an OU, use, for example, an SCP to control the accounts that are within that OU, right? But you can take it one step further. So I'm going to use my brand, this account, which is obviously not an account I always use, but so which is a good place because I can always take the time and clean it up, right? So I'm just going to type AWS Control Tower so that you see what that looks like. So I'm going to do Control Tower. I'm going to go into Control Tower and let's see what it says. You would see that the definition here, it says set up and govern your multi-account AWS environment, right? We're still talking about governance and AWS and multiple AWS accounts. So that's still the point. But now you're following best practice, right? So well-architected, automated landing zone. That's the point. It's creating, there is more to Control Tower, but just know that it gives you a landing zone that is well-architected, that follows AWS best practice, right? So I'm just going to say set up landing zone, right? The point is that in my own case, I really want to do this in US West 2. I love using US West 2, right? I mean, US East 1 is like, I call it the hot cake AWS zone. So most time US East 1, I usually do my stuff in US West 2. But I mean, you can choose your region. So there's usually like an home region. In this case, I'll say US West 2. It is also saying, region deny setting. You can deny some regions from doing stuff. Like, for example, you can do all that. But for now, I'm just going to say, I'm just going to ignore that. So now you can see, for example, it already is introducing us to some OUs. It's saying configure organizational unit. We already know what that is. We just know it's a grouping. A unit is just something that you can put multiple accounts under, right? It's like an hierarchy you can create. It's like a grouping for you to group resources. So in this case, it's saying he wants to configure organizational unit, and it's saying the foundational OUs. He gave a basic name, but I can change it if I want. There's an additional OU that is also creating like a sandbox OU. I'm going to leave it as a default, right? So the management account has already been taken. If you notice, let me zoom in a bit. Just so you see, the management account has been taken as the account that is creating it. So this is my account. It's using that. Here, the log archive account, for example, if you're creating if you were to set up an organization, it's also okay for you to have like an archive account, right? An account that basically keep all your logs, right? There's also an audit account that is also there. So in the previous place, we basically created like the OUs, but here we are setting up this account. So there's the configure shared accounts. So in this case, this is the management account, and then we can create a log archive account, and then we can also create an audit account. So I'm just going to go here. I'm just going to do Brainyl .cloud +1 at gmail.com and try this and just say hopefully it goes through, and then I'll just call it log, and then here I'm just going to call it audit. Okay, I'm just going to leave it as that. You see by account already, so yeah, it obviously has been used. It may not use this one, so let me just make sure you give it accounts email that would work. So in this case, I'm going to do next. They are all obviously alias to my accounts, right? So here there is room for me to use self-managed AWS account access with AWS or another. Like I can do like a self-managed, or I can just use with IAM Identity Center, which is exactly the one I'm going to use. So this is like self-managed, but I can actually use the AWS, the one that comes with it. There's also CloudTrade configuration, actions. It says it captures the actions of Control Tower. If I want to enable it or not enable it, I'm going to leave it, or maybe I'm just not even going to. Or maybe I'll just keep it. I'll just keep this. Like I said, it's going to create a lot of things for you. So just be sure to do this if you want to, but it's not a must. If you really want to take like your AWS organization setup further, then you pretty much will want to do this. And I think I will just leave it enabled. There's room for me to set a KMS encryption. I can keep that unenabled if I want to. It looks like everything is good, right? So you can see here it says I understand the permissions will use. It gives me a lot of. It just gives me like something that I need to check here. I'm going to check it. And it says, there is just some things that says how long it's going to keep, access login and all that. So I'm going to say, okay, set up landing zone. Let's see. It's going to take time because think about it. We did give it, some baseline OUs to set up for us. We also gave it some baseline accounts to set up for us. So it's going to take a while to start creating all that. So setting landing zone is going to take some time. But the point is that, what do you think this, you can see estimated time remaining 60 minutes. So I'm not even sure I'm not entirely sure if we're even going to see it finish on this call. Else we're just going to wait. But maybe we're going to allow it to continue its thing. We'll go back to the slide, and then we'll come back to see if it has finished. Maybe check some things that it has done for us, right? The whole point is that this is it's like instead of you doing it manually, like creating the organization, creating the OUs, creating an account, landing zone can give you like more or less like Control Tower can give you like a good starting point. Following all the best practice, following patterns that are common out there. Okay. So that's one way to use it. So you can see, for example, right now it's still telling us zero accounts. It's going to vend those accounts. It's going to create those accounts. It's going to create units. It's going to tell us the things that are passing preventive controls, detective controls, proactive controls, all these things. You're going to see them. You're going to see how your organization is compliant, but right now it's going to take some time. Okay. Initially, when I wanted to do this call, I was thinking maybe I should create this before the call. But again, it's nice that you really go through the process to see what it looks like. Let me refresh. I'm not sure what happened there, but yeah, it's going to take time. So you can see estimated time is show status. There's a lot that is going to be created. So I'm not even sure. Maybe I'm going to wait when it's done. It's because I don't want this video to be too long, right? So I pretty much might continue and just take the part where it's done. Because again, most times we do these things live on TikTok here, like but ideally, probably I'll wait when the video is done up to a point because we can't wait. It looks like it's going to take time. Initially, I wanted to actually create this landing zone, but I also wanted you to see the feel, to see how it's going to look like. So what I can do is that maybe after it's done, I'm going to go into it and just tell you the next things that you need to do and then add it to the video. Okay. So it's going to create the point is that it's still going to create a landing zone, and that landing zone will be like still setting up an AWS organization, following the best practice, setting up the things that we've not even talked about, right? Creating a log archive account, creating a security account. It's going to do all that for you, and then you can obviously customize it. There are more advanced stuff that we can talk about when you talk about Control Tower, but we will not be able to get to that now. So let's leave it to provision. Let's give it some time. So we're still talking about AWS organization and like we're talking about organization, right? If you think about an organization, now is now when we're talking about the things that makes it an organization, that makes it really, really powerful, really, really useful. One of it is resource access manager, right? The point is that within the organization, you can now share resources, right? Because you can provision it in one place and use it somewhere else. And you would see when you start doing some advanced things in AWS, you understand where these patterns become very, very important. So AWS RAM is something you need to just know. It's obviously it's a very, very beautiful service. But what does it do? Share AWS resources across accounts. So the point is that now that we now have multiple accounts, now that we now have multiple OUs, won't it be nice if we could share AWS, the same AWS resources that share it within your AWS account, which is good, right? Avoid resource duplication. Sometimes, why do you need to duplicate it? And sometimes you just need to create it somewhere and share it somewhere else. Share it somewhere else that it can also be used. Same resources, but used somewhere else, right? So share with any account or within an organization. So it means you can share to an account. You can also share like you can either share with an account or you can even share with an organization. And you know the benefit of sharing with an organization. It means that all the accounts in that organization can basically benefit from it, right? It's a free service, right? You only pay for the resources, meaning the resources that you are sharing is still what you're paying for. You're not paying for using RAM to share those resources, okay? Key benefit, reduce operational overhead. And you're going to see, when you start using RAM, you start seeing the benefit because imagine that you have something that has to be shared within accounts. It won't make sense if you have to create them per account, right? So sometimes you create it in one place and then share it with other accounts, and it's the same thing. And then you can improve resource utilization with that. You can also do centralized resource management. That's the point. It's only managed, it's created, managed from one place, but you can share it to other accounts for them to use it, right? Simplified network architecture. And it's one of the things that I really wanted to mention because if you start doing transit gateway, you see that you have to use RAM to use transit gateway effectively, because transit gateway will be created maybe like in a shared services account or in like your networking account. And from there, it has to be shared to all the other accounts. For it to more or less like have the full networking component that it needs for it to create that transit gate, the entire transit gateway connection that you need, right, across your different accounts. So the point is that you create the transit gateway, and then there's some entities in that transit gateway that you have to share into the other accounts for them to be able to use the transit gateway effectively, right? Instead of you having to provision transit gateway here and there. So although RAM can share resources, not all the AWS resources, so sometimes you need to also be aware of the services that are supported. Here I did mention just a few lists, but there are many. So Transit Gateway, VPC Subnet, we've seen VPC Subnet. We've seen Transit Gateway just slightly. We've not really talked so much about it. But VPC Subnet, Route 53 resolver rules, and there are many more services. So if you type AWS RAM supported AWS services, you're going to see a lot of them, meaning the services that you can share, right, to another account. Cool. Obviously not something I want to show, but just know if you have like a subnet, you can basically take that subnet and you can share it with another AWS account. That's just how it works, okay? That brings me to a very fantastic subject, which is called Service Catalog. So for this one, I'm just going to say exactly what is in the slide. But yesterday, I created a video just to talk about Service Catalog. So I created a video that shows you how you can see immediate value from just using Service Catalog, especially considering the guys who are built, who went through like a CloudFormation class with me. You would see in that video how I converted that CloudFormation template into like a backstage where a developer can go and just click and install infrastructure, right? I mean, all the ways we've seen installing infrastructure, if you think about how we've seen it, we've used CDK, code. We've also used YAML, more or less like templates to do IAC. But the thing is, the problem with that is that you need someone to either understand the IAC or the CDK, whatever you're using. You also need them to know exactly how to apply those changes, right? We as infra, that is good for us. It's easy for us. That's our realm. But you sometimes have developers that you're working with that these developers don't really know they don't know the details of those cloud formation, the template, how it should work and all that. And that's where a backstage becomes very helpful, because with a backstage, what you can do is that you can focus on the area that you're focusing, which is infrastructure. And then if your developers need the resources that you are provisioning, they don't need to go through any hassle. You can basically just create a backstage that they will use to provision these resources. And that's where Service Catalog, it does it beautifully. Okay. It's one service that I love in AWS. I love it. I love it. Service Catalog. It's a portal. So what it means is that you can actually build a portal. So your IAC that you're learning, your cloud formation, your infrastructure as code, it has benefits, because now you can convert all that into a product that you can launch in Service Catalog, right? So you see it as a template, but you can actually turn that template into a product and just give somebody the product to say, go and launch this product. I uploaded a video yesterday. That video just explains it, how you can take a very simple template and then you can convert that to a product, and you can see how a developer. So because here the video is already, I can't go in depth, but I have a video that covers just this part. Okay. So the point is that self-service for approved products, and those products are really service. They are really IAC. They are really infrastructure as code, cloud formation templates, right? That you can pretty much just issue. And when obviously there are steps you have to follow, but the end product is a product, and that product is not something somebody needs to write like code to launch it, or no. The person just needs to go to a UI and say, I want this product, and they'll just launch it. If you have some variables that you want, they will provide those variables, they will supply those variables, and then you're good to go. Okay. So the way it works is that if you see that video, you say how I broke it down. An administrator will create product. You basically create a product, and those products will be under a catalog, right? So when you create that product catalog now, right? So a product will have a catalog will have products, right? So, and then once you create that, so you have more or less like you create a product catalog, which is just all your products that you have, right? Once you do that, it means that you can also put them in a portfolio, and that portfolio is what a user can have access to for them to launch those pre-approved configurations. And there's a reason why you want to do that. Many benefits. One is sometimes you want to standardize, right? You want, if everyone is installing a version of RDS, or if everyone in the organization needs to install RDS, they have to use an approved template, right? It could be that you want to standardize how the deployment happens. So more or less like when they are deploying, maybe it needs to have certain tags. All that can be controlled at the infra level, right? And just allow the developers to use the templates, deploy it however they want, okay? So it solves a lot of problems. So it's based on CloudFormation template. You see it in the demo. Users, overwhelmed with AWS service options, right? Exactly. That's the problem, because the users we're talking about, they are not as savvy, AWS savvy as I and you. You would tell them CloudFormation. Maybe they don't really know, right? So they are not as savvy. So you don't really want to bore them down with that details. Rather, you just want to give them a UI. Go to this UI, install the product that you want, right? So need for standardized deployment also is one of the benefits. Ensuring compliance. Compliance is really key, because now you can bake that compliance into the template and let developers use it however they want, right? And then, governance is also what you can also do without actually blocking innovation, meaning developers can basically use. Okay. So if you look at it, I did draw a diagram here, but it just basically breaks it down. So if you see this slide and you go to the video that I created about it, you will just love it. The point is that there will be products and there will be a portfolio, right? And a portfolio can have multiple products. And those products, the portfolio itself, you give IAM principals access to that portfolio. And for that reason, they'll be able to deploy any product that they have access to deploying, right? Which comes in the form of provision product. Okay. So the whole idea is that the products themselves are CloudFormation templates, packaged as products. And then it depends on you. In my own case, I did an example of S3, but it can be anything. It could be a VPC. It could be like an entire product itself that deploys the VPC, the database, and everything, and you can just package all that and put it there as a product. And if you wanted to install it, you just go there and set it up. Okay. Portfolios are really collection of related products. You can have like dev portfolio, prod portfolio. You can break it out however you want, and then it's obviously the access itself is controlled using IAM, right? It does sharing, right? The beautiful thing, when we're not talking about organization, portfolio sharing now becomes very important. You can actually share your portfolio. Provision products are basically the end user, so provisioning a product. So it sees a product that is out there, and then it just clicks launch, and it launches the product. Okay. Obviously there's constraint as part of it, like constraints is part of it, but if you go into that video you actually see me break it down, because this slide cannot really take everything. Okay, it can't take everything. But there is another video that you just need to watch. It breaks this down. Just know that service catalog is just a way for you to create a backstage, a service portal for people, whether it's developers, whether it's management, just a place where anyone that doesn't need to be tech savvy can go and launch those same service, those same CloudFormation template that you are building as a infrastructure developer or engineer. Okay, cool. There's so many benefits. So organizations standardize deployment across teams. You can enforce tagging, compliance policies. I think I've talked about many of these things. Cost control, right? Through approved configuration. Because now, if everybody's only deploying the things that are approved, you can put your cost. You can manage. You can know that the things people are deploying are things that are actually approved. People are not just going and deploying things anyhow, right? Reduce support burden. Yes, because now you don't need me to deploy again for you. I'll send you to the package and then you can basically install it, right? For users, obviously quick access to approved resources, no need to understand cloud formation, self-service, you can self-service yourself, version control and updates, you see all that. It's one of the benefits. You see that product can be versioned, and you can even add upgrades to versions. Okay. So for governance, centralized product management, audit trail of all launches, you can see who's launching what, who did what, you can see all that. And then consistent security configurations. All those are benefits that you can get if you use Service Catalog to actually manage your product. Okay. So we've said a lot in this class. Let's look at some of the best practices that you need to think about in terms of when you're looking at AWS. You're thinking about governance and management, different account management. So use separate accounts, right? You don't want production to be your sandbox account. Sandbox account or test account are accounts that you're playing with or you're just innovating on. But production is really a place that's stable. So you want to keep those separate. Limit management account usage, meaning the management account we saw when you're creating the organization is not something you should want to be playing with. That's like your management account. So it has to be limited. The people who have access to that account should be few. There are so many security practices you can apply to that, right? Security, MFA, we know what the MFA is, multi-factor. It's something you need to do when you are dealing with organizations, right? SCPs, we've seen how that works. You can also apply SCP. Automation, Control Tower, that's really what Control Tower was doing for us. It's just that it's still taking time, it's still launching, it's not done yet, but Control Tower can basically just do all those automation for you. Instead of you doing it, you can actually handle even the vending process. Infrastructure as code, and that's why we also talked about Service Catalog, right? Because now with if you do infrastructure as code, you can now use Service Catalog, and because you have an AWS organization, things just begins to become very, very easy, right? Depending on kind of products that you're building inside of AWS, right? And then cost management. So once you have cost tagging in place, it means that you can actually see who is spending what, which OU is spending, which account. You can break things down further to really see how cost is being shared within the organization, to see which product is costing you more and which is costing you less, right? And then consolidated billing, the fact that you can consolidate all your billing to one place, get also the benefit that comes with having like a shared billing or like an AWS organization. Okay. There is really a lot. So in this class, we did talk about multi-account strategies, organization and organizational patterns, AWS organization for centralized management, service control policies. We saw an example. Consolidated billing is just a benefit of AWS organization that you can use. Control Tower for automated governance. We're launching one. I'm going to make sure I add a video as part of it so that you can see when it's done, what was provisioned and how we can navigate through it, right? Landing zones, guardrails for compliance, resource sharing with RAM, right? You can reuse RAM for resource sharing. These are some of the things that you begin to appreciate when you start doing multi-account setup, right? And then self-service provisioning with Service Catalog. Honestly, I have a video that I created. That video, if you watch that video, you're just going to get exactly what you need to learn about Service Catalog. So because this is already 1 hour plus long, and I don't really like my videos going way more than 1 hour. Okay. So that brings us to the end of this class. Okay, that brings us to the end of this class. The point is, I just want to end the recording so that I can go back to what was being deployed in Control Tower and see if it has finished. If it hasn't, don't worry. I'm going to make sure it's done. I'm going to record any part that is missing, add it to the video, and then upload when I'm done. Okay. But let's go back to the account and see what's happening. Let's look. Yeah, it's still going to take. Oh, look! It looks like it finished. Cool. So it looks like it finished, which is nice. So if you do dashboard, for example, so remember I'm in this account. It's basically the so if I go to dashboard, so this is landing. It says it's now available, right? So that's really beautiful. It means that it created. I thought it's going to take time, but the point is that you can see it has 2 organizations, 3 shared accounts. The point is shared account in this case is that it's trying to tell you that these shared accounts are accounts that will be shared amongst the other accounts, right? It means if that place is if one of those shared accounts, we'll see what it looks like. If it's a login account, it means that you can collect the logs from all the other accounts and move them there, right? And if that's a security account, that security account can manage security, can do security, everything related to security on behalf of the other account. That's why it's called a shared account. It said 20 preventive controls to enforce policies. It did create some preventive policy. Remember, it creates based on best practice. So let's now see organization, right? You can see that all of a sudden we're beginning to see the things we're kind of used to. We saw this at some point, right? So you can see there's the roots. Obviously, that's the roots. There is the security account. There is the security OU. There is the log OU. So there is like okay, this is an account. So there's the security OU, and inside there is an account called there is an account called log, and there's an account called audit, right? And then if you go back to the organization, so let's start from the organization. You see that there is root, there is security. Inside of security, there's the log account. You can see that's why it has an account ID. This is an org unit. That's why it has like an org unit ID, right? OU dash something. But these ones are really IDs, right? And if you see, it basically differs. It differs from this. This is now like this account that is up here, but these two were vended for us, okay? And then there's like a sandbox OU, but there's no account in there. Cool. So what else can we see? If you go into, for example, users and access, you can basically see there's like a portal here where we can log in. So remember at some point we were asking for like a portal. So it's asking me for username here for me to log in. If you see, for example, users groups, it did create some, that's why I said it's going to create so many things, but it's all on best practice. Many of these things are things that some of them are things that you pretty much need to get used to. But the point is that it's going to create a couple of things. So if you go to dashboard, for example, you can see we only have one organizational unit. And it says we do have 3 accounts. You can go to the OU. And then you can actually go into the account itself that was created. So there is the log account, there is this my own account here, and there is this audit. There is also the audit account that was created. There's the log account, and then there is also this account, right? Which is pretty much it's under the root OU. While these two are under security unit, right? We did create an OU and account. So and it says it's compliant, meaning it's actually doing some checks to see what's going on, right? If you see enabled controls, if you notice, there was a place where we were seeing many settings, but you can see it here. For example, there's so many controls, right? Some are preventive, right? That were enabled for us, meaning it's just going to prevent something from basically happening. Some are going to be detective in nature, meaning it's going to detect, but it's not going to stop it. And these ones are going to be controlled by SCPs. We've seen how SCPs can actually prevent something, right? You saw that when I was denied EC2 access, I couldn't do it. So you can see all those kind of controls. What about control catalog? I mean, there's some things here you can see. If you see the shared account, there's management. So this is management here, right? And the management is basically this account here, right? Where you create the organization from the first start, it's always going to end up becoming the management account. But there's also the log archive, account, right? So this is the log archive account, and there's also the audit account. It's just giving you some details, telling you the email, giving you some details about the account, right? So let's see if I'll be able to log in here. Let me see if I can find my credential. So once you're done setting up your control tower, you see an email like this that says your administrator has invited you to join, invited you to AWS IAM Identity Center. Just accept the invitation. Once you do that, it's going to bring you here. You just need to set a new password. In this case, I have a password that I want to use. I'm just going to exit and do, so I'll try it again and see it matches. I would say set new password. So my password is good. And now that my password is so I'm back here at the login screen to log in. So I'm just going to put in my email, brainyl.cloud +1@gmail.com. I'm just going to do next. And then for password, I'm just going to put a password that I did set at that earlier step. I'm going to do next. I think it wants me to set up this. I'm just going to do authenticator app. I'm going to scan the QR code. And then I'm just going to do scan the QR code. I'm basically doing it here. It's saying I should add the code. I'm just going to put it in. It did generate the code, so I'm just going to assign that MFA. So it said I'm done. I'm just going to log in, right? So this is going to take me to basically the start page, the SSO start page. So I'm going to accept. So you can see this is the number of accounts we have. This is the audit accounts. I'm giving access to administrator access here, administrator access here. This is the log account. I have administrator access here. So it means you can basically, for example, enter the audit account and see. So it's just like your normal AWS account, but it has been basically set up using the, what do you call it, the control tower, right? So this is going to be the shared audit account. So that's pretty much it. We use Control Tower to set up a baseline, and that baseline did launch a set of accounts, and we're able to accept the invitation from the email. From there, we're able to set our password, and we were able to more or less like set up our MFA device. And then whenever you log in, it's going to bring you to your portal, and then you can see all the accounts that you have access to. Remember, in this case, I'm like the person who created the account, and I have access to all the accounts. But you can now begin to provision users and grant them access to the different account that you want them to have access to. Just so you know, like I said at the beginning, you only need to do this if you really are interested in creating a control tower, because I'm going to now go through cleaning it up. So all these things you see, I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to get rid of control tower in this account. But again, I can't really add the process here because it's going to take time. So just so you know, you need to pretty much think about if you really want to create this, because you have to go back and start cleaning up, right? So it has to delete all these accounts. So just take note. Your accounts that you know of, but they're already part of an AWS organization. So what it means is that this is control tower, but you still can go to, for example, AWS organization, where we were coming from before, to see, what it created behind the scene for us, right? So, for example, you can see that if you go to organization, you see we were in this page before, right? We were doing this manually, but with Control Tower, all these were done for us. The management account was created for us. An OU called security was created in there. There was an audit account, log account. So that's what I was saying, that if you know AWS organization, you still can achieve the same. It's just that you have to do the work, you have to do your customized need. But Control Tower can basically give you all that GUIs just right out of the box, okay? And yeah, that's pretty much a very, very good introduction for you to see. For example, if you go to policies, SCPs have been enabled. You can see, for example, there are a lot of, this full AWS access was the one that was given to us from the beginning, but you notice that we created our own. So in this case, they also created. So AWS guardrails, and all that. What about services that were enabled? One thing you notice is that, for example, Identity Center, so single sign-on was enabled. CloudTrail was enabled, meaning collecting all the CloudTrail logs within the organization, sending it to the log archive account. Config was enabled. We've seen config. What config is? Config is to watch configuration changes, right, over time within your organization. So that it means that this is also being taken, this is also being kept for us as a security measure, right? What other thing was enabled? Let's just look at some of the services that was enabled. So config was enabled, CloudTrail. So yeah, those two were actually enabled for us, and then Control Tower itself was obviously one of the services used. And then if you see policies, which one was okay? This was enabled. The other things are just settings, right? So sometimes you can go back to the AWS organization, see the things that are related to organization, but you can also go to Control Tower and see the things that are basically related to Control Tower, looking at it from the Control Tower dashboard, okay? But the point is, just know that Control Tower is going to create a landing zone following AWS practice to launch an AWS organization that is that is set up on best practice. That's the whole idea. But the thing is that it's like another way of creating an AWS organization without having to go through it, creating it one step at a time, right? AWS Control Tower can just create it for you, give you all the best practice, and then you can get started, and then you can customize things as time goes on, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So that brings us to the end of this class, this particular class.